We are so happy to welcome you to our third winter Bible class, where we're dealing with the book of Exodus. And for those of you who are joining us by YouTube or Facebook, we're grateful that these are posted, hopefully, about 4 or 5 days after the class itself. And so you should be able, if you miss a class, if you'd like to go back and make it up, be able to do so. Plus, I mentioned you can also pause and taking notes, which is always helpful when you're trying to take a class online or by video. But we're happy to have you however way you may be joining us. We're looking at the 10 words in Exodus 20, and we have moved through a number of them. We're down to verse 16. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You have a parallel to this in Deuteronomy 5:20 for the new generation that came about during the wilderness wanderings. Also, turn to Matthew chapter 19. When the rich young ruler came to Jesus and asked him what he must do to inherit eternal life, Jesus quoted the 10 words. Jesus said to him, verse 17, "Why do you call me good? No one is good but one, that is God." Now, just in passing, the argument here was, if you call me good and I am good, then that means I'm God, and that's what I claim to be, which counteracted what national Israel said about it. But if you want to enter into life, keep the commandments. Now, when you said the commandments, every Jew alive knew what was under consideration there. He said to him, which ones? See, he's asking, what good thing? Now, surely if somebody's as good as I am, there ought to just be one thing he'd have to do. So what good thing? He says, which one? Notice Jesus did not quote to him all the 10 words. He used representative ones. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. And then our one for tonight. You shall not bear false witness. Honor your father and your mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself, which comes, of course, from the book of Leviticus, dealing with the summary of these 10 words. So do not bear false witness against your neighbor. If you love your neighbor like you love yourself, then you will not bear false witness against him. Now we look first of all at the personal application. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. So it's an individual thing. See, if I don't apply God's will to me individually, it won't help me. If I just apply it to you, then it won't help me. So here, you do it. You do not bear false witness. Turn to Leviticus chapter 19. Look at verse 11. You shall not steal, nor deal falsely, nor lie to one another. And you shall not swear by my name falsely, nor shall you profane the name of your God, I, Jehovah. So swearing by his name falsely would be bearing false witness. Look at Proverbs chapter 25. Verse 18. A man who bears false witness against his neighbor is like a club, a sword, and a sharp arrow. And the idea in the context of that one proverb is all three of those will be negative against they would be harmful to you. So is someone who's bearing false witness. So you see the personal application. Don't hurt your neighbor by swearing falsely against him. Then you have the protective application. This introduces the principle of things being established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. 2 or 3 is more than 1. But rules out 1. Things are not established by the testimony of 1 witness. There must be what we call corroboration. 2 or 3 witnesses. Now this is such an important principle. I believe we need to read a good bit concerning it. So let's look over to Numbers chapter 35. And verse 30. Numbers 35:30. Whoever kills a person, the murderer shall be put to death on the testimony of witnesses. But 1 witness is not sufficient testimony against a person for the death penalty. So you're going to put somebody to death, you need to make sure you're doing it to someone who deserves death. Not someone that an enemy got angry with and lied about, and you put them to death, which basically would be murder by proxy on the part of the liar. I don't want to kill them, so I'll use you to kill them for me. So don't bear this false witness. Look again at Deuteronomy 17. And verse 6. Whoever is deserving of death shall be put to death on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. He shall not be put to death on the testimony of 1 witness. That's a very good explicit statement of this rule right there. All right, let's go to the New Testament, to Matthew chapter 18. Beginning in verse 15 and going through verse 20, you have the procedure to deal with a brother who sins against you. And as you read this and let it sink in and compare it to the way some folks act when they're sinned against, you'll find it's a whole lot contrary to what's done sometimes. Verse 15, moreover, if your brother sins against you, now there's individual to individual. Go and tell him his fault. Between you and him, what? Yeah. Alone. That means don't put it on Facebook. Don't put it on Twitter. Don't put it on the gossip mill. Don't tell anybody else. You go to him alone. If he hears you, that is, you're able to reconcile, straighten this thing out, you have gained your brother. So there are 2 possibilities when you go. He may hear you and you solve it. He may refuse you and it is not solved. Right? Verse 16 takes up with what do you do if he won't listen? But if he will not hear, take with you 1 or 2 more. Now if you take 1, you and that 1 would be 2, right? If you take 2, you and 2 would be 3. That by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every word may be established. Now, this is what we do in the church, and notice it's based on this same principle that we had under the law of Moses. So you take 2 or 3 witnesses. So it's established that he would not listen. See, this eliminates and protects from individual agendas against one another. I just don't like you, and so I'm going to try to harm you. And so I'll lie about it. Some of us have been there and gotten t-shirts on that matter, and it's not a fun way to exist. Sometimes you have reprobates who act this way, and that's the procedure Jesus sets down. Then look at John 8. Look at verse 17. It is also written in your law that the testimony of two men is true. Now, that's a different way of saying the very same thing. Now, notice, let's go back to verse 13, look at your context. The Pharisees therefore said to him, you bear witness of yourself. Your witness is not true. That is, valid as testimony according to the law. Jesus answered and said to them, even if I bear witness of myself, my witness is true, for I know where I came from and where I'm going, but you do not know where I come from and where I am going. You judge according to the flesh, that is, you judge human judgment, according to the wisdom of the human. I judge no one. And yet if I do judge, my judgment is true, for I am not alone, but I with the Father who sent me. I and the Father. It is also written in your law that the testimony of two men is true. I am one who bears witness of myself, and the Father who sent me bears witness of me. There are two witnesses. Now, how was the Father bearing witness of Jesus?
What do you think about the Holy Spirit?
Flesh that out a little more.
From the apostles?
No,
From the miracles?
by the miracles. These are written that you may believe. My Father's bearing witness of me through the miracles that I'm able to perform that confirm that I am God's Son. That's what I'm claiming. So you have two witnesses. I'm a witness of myself because I came from the Father. My Father's a witness of me. And when you get over to John, well, here in John 8, back in John 6 and 7, he will say, the works that I do bear witness of me. They testify. Now turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 13. Paul says, this will be the third time I am coming to you. By the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every word shall be established. I have told you before and foretell as if I were present the second time. And now being absent, I write to those who have sinned before and to all the rest, that if I come again, I will not spare. So I came to you, I wrote you a letter, I'm coming to you again. 2 or 3 witnesses will establish this. And of course, he had taught them the truth and confirmed it when he was incarnate. So he proved himself to be an apostle by the miracle. Working from God. 1 Timothy 5 and verse 19. This is talking about the overseers of the congregation. It says in verse 17, let the elders who rule well be counted worthy of double honor. And in the context, this seems to be paid for being a full-time elder. Especially those who labor in the word and doctrine. And that seems parallel to Acts 6 when the problem arose and the apostles said, we're going to appoint people to take care of this benevolent matter, and we will give our time to the Word of God and prayer. So here's an elder who would labor, that would be his work, full time apparently, in word and doctrine. For the Scripture says, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain, and the laborer is worthy of his wages. That's the same argument he used that preachers have a right to be paid. Do not receive an accusation against an elder except from 2 or 3 witnesses. So if somebody comes to you and has something negative to say about our elders, the first thing you need to say is, where are your witnesses? And if you don't have any witnesses, you need to be quiet. And besides that, I don't need to hear this. You need to go to them if you have a problem. And over my career, I've had people come, gripe about elders, and I've said, I'll tell you what, I'll set up a meeting with you and them, and you can tell them to their face instead of behind their backs. And in 50 years of preaching, I hadn't set up one meeting yet. People who talk to you behind the back of someone are cowards. And you need to realize if you listen to them, if they talk to you about somebody, they'll talk to somebody about you. So you need to stop that kind of stuff. As my friend Barney says, nip it in the bud. Stop it right off. So if accusation is true, verse 20, let's say that you have 2 or 3 witnesses. Those who are sinning rebuke in the presence of all, that the rest also may fear. So if it's true, those elders need to be rebuked. And I do not know if in the presence of all here is in the presence of all the other elders or the congregation. But it implies there are other people present when that rebuke takes place. But it's an established sin. It's not a made up or a vendetta. You have the witnesses to prove, yes, this happened. And then Hebrews chapter 10. And verse 28. Now, let's get the context here. Verse 26, and we're really jumping into the middle because I told you start in Hebrews 1:1 and don't quit. For if we sin willfully, there's willful sin, after we have received the knowledge of the truth, all right, we've obeyed the gospel. With the context of the book of Hebrews, the next statement makes immediate sense. There no longer remains a sacrifice for sins. The sinning willfully here is rejecting the gospel and trying to go back to Judaism, to go back to some other sacrifice for sins. Jesus is the only sacrifice for sins. They're trying to go back under Judaism, but that sacrifice was done away with at Pentecost. So there is no other sacrifice if you reject Jesus. That's it. What do you have left then? But a certain fearful expectation of judgment and fiery indignation, which will devour the adversaries. Anyone who has rejected Moses' law dies without mercy on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. All right, you're trying to go back under Moses' law. Here's what happened if you rejected it. Of how much sorer, King James language here, worse punishment, do you suppose will he be thought worthy, who has trampled the Son of God underfoot, counted the blood of the covenant by which he was sanctified a common thing, and he insulted the Spirit of grace? How would you do those things? Reject the gospel. You reject Christ, it's as though you were right there by the cross with those scribes and Pharisees and national Israel saying, put him to death, crucify him, because you've crucified the Son of God again. You trampled him underfoot. Counted the blood of the covenant by which he was sanctified a common thing. Well, the blood of the covenant is what saves us. So you've rejected Christ as the sin offering. So there remains no more sacrifice if you leave Christ. Moses' law, you violated it, rejected it, 2 or 3 witnesses. You were put to death. How much sorrow will be the punishment? How much worse will be the punishment? Someone who rejects Christ's law. And again, you have the 2 or 3 witnesses principle. So do you see that? Any questions or comments on that? So that is so very important. Now, if we will follow that principle today, we'll stop a lot of things that need to be stopped. Where are the witnesses? Then you have the preventive application. This would address particularly the court system and the giving of testimony. And under Israel, under Judaism, you have the civil court system. The king, once they appointed a king, was the civil judge. Prior to that, they'd had judges that had been appointed to hear these cases. Of course, Moses was hearing them by himself until his father-in-law said, I'm paraphrasing, you're going to kill yourself trying to carry this load. You need to appoint some men who are qualified men that they can hear them, and if they run up against something they don't know the answer, they can bring that to you. You can take care of the things they can't answer. And that's what apparently has been done. But all lying is condemned, but this especially deals with giving false testimony. I believe there's a big jawbreaker word for that called perjury. Let's look at Deuteronomy 19. And look at verse 15. One witness shall not rise against a man concerning any iniquity or any sin that he commits. By the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, the matter shall be established. If a false witness rises against any man to testify against him of wrongdoing, testify, see your court system, then both men in the controversy shall stand before Jehovah, before the priests and the judges who serve in those days. And the judges shall make careful inquiry. And indeed, if the witness is false, who has testified falsely against his brother, then look at this. You shall do to him as he thought to have done to his brother. So you shall put away the evil from among you. And those who remain shall hear and fear. And hereafter they shall not again commit such evil among you. Your eye shall not pity. Life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. Right? I get mad with you, drag you into court, falsely accuse you. It's proved that I can't establish my case. Whatever the outcome of your trial would have been is what's going to happen to me. You don't believe that'll stop it? We could establish that in our court system. We'd throw out probably 3/4 of all the cases that are heard. I'm guessing. Turn to Proverbs 6. What I'm trying to establish with you is the court system. I have found that not too many people have picked up on that court system arrangement. Proverbs 6, 16 to 19. These 6 things Jehovah hates. Yes, 7 are an abomination to him, by the way. Those of you who went through hermeneutics, there's the X plus 1 formula. 6, 7. A proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil. Now look at this. We've already had lying mentioned. A false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among brethren. All right, you've had a false witness differentiated from a liar. So this addresses your court system, where a witness would come into play. All lying is wrong, but he differentiates it from just lying. You're lying in court. Turn over to Proverbs 14. Look at verse 5. Here you have antithetical parallelism. A faithful witness does not lie, but, so you're going to have a contrast, an antithesis. A false witness will utter lies. You have a faithful witness and a false witness. One lies, one won't lie. So you see this as it plays out. Then in chapter 19, verse 5, a false witness will not go unpunished, and he who speaks lies will not escape. Drop down to verse 9. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who speaks lies shall perish. See, one word change. And yet you have an emphasis. When the Bible says something one time, it's important. When it says it more than one, there's an emphasis. We've seen this emphasis in the court system. Questions or comments? One writer said, little B on your outline, the fact that a person was acquitted or convicted largely on the strength of evidence given by witnesses made it imperative that all possible precautions be taken to prevent the giving of false testimony. That principle is still true in our court system. That would, in my opinion, make available a lot of seats in Congress and in the White House. And not just now, all the way through history. And that's probably true in every country in the world. Because we've had false witnesses all along. Cain said to the Lord when God said, "Where's Abel, your brother?" What did Cain say? All right, he implied by that, I don't know. It's not my responsibility. He was bearing false witness. He did know where Abel was. Another says, speaking the truth and honoring promises is the cement that holds society together. To tell lies in court is to undermine the very law itself. Hold society together. Telling the truth, even when it hurts. Another said, in giving false testimony under oath, 3 sins are committed. A lie is told, justice is perverted, and the name of God is blasphemed. Now that was written at a time when you took an oath in court. So help me God was part of that oath. That's been taken out in most of the places I've been. Did y'all use it? You did use it. Some of the things I've heard were, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true to the best of your knowledge? So this was implied, you take it in the name of God. So help me God. Now let's look at some examples of false testimony. Go back to Genesis 39. And Again, I think this is important enough for us to spend time looking at it. Look at verse 7. It came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph. And she said, lie with me. But he refused and said to his master's wife, look, my master does not know what is with me in the house, and he has committed all that he has to my hand. There is no one greater in this house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against Elohim? So it was, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he did not heed her, to lie with her or to be with her. But it happened about this time, when Joseph went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was inside, that she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled and ran outside. So it was, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled outside, that she called to the men of her house and spoke to them, saying, see, he has brought into us a Hebrew to laugh at us, to mock us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And it happened, when he heard that I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled and went outside. So she kept his garment with her until his master came home. Then she spoke to him with words like these, saying, the Hebrew servant whom you brought to us came in to mock me. So it happened, as I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled outside. So it was, when his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, your servant did to me after this manner, that his anger was aroused. Going out to get to heaven to know against him. Then Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the prison. Now, here's an innocent man sent to prison on false testimony. And if you keep up with what's happening in the legal arena, there is an organization that is reviewing a lot of cases where evidence was shaky at best, and DAs are vacating some convictions. The sad part is that many of these people have been in prison for years. And they were convicted on either shoddy police work, false testimony, or insufficient evidence. Which, if you grew up when I did, you know there was a time that officials could pretty well get away with what they wanted to against certain people. Somebody wrote a country song about that, something about a night when the something went down to Georgia. Why she picked my state to do that, I do not know. She probably made a lot of money off of it. So, this is part of it. 1 Kings 21. Remember, Naboth wanted Ahab's vineyard. Ahab wouldn't sell it, so Naboth went home and pouted. Mrs. Naboth, by the name of Jezebel, said, I'll get it for you. So she wrote letters in Ahab's name and sealed them with his signet ring, sent to the elders and nobles dwelling in the city. She said, verse 9, proclaim a fast and seat Naboth with high honor among the people. Seat 2 men. Now, the King James says what? Base men here.
2 men, sons of Lot.
Belial, sons of Belial.
Yeah.
All right. I like the way the New King James puts that. Scoundrel. We all understand what a scoundrel is, don't we?
The scoundrel was 2 men.
Yeah, they'd be scoundrels.
Okay.
That's people who aren't worth much and are liable to do anything. Before him to bear witness against him, saying, you have blasphemed God and the king, Then take him out and stone him that he may die. So they did that. Verse 13. As false testimony, here a man died because of covetousness. We haven't gotten to that one yet. On the part of Naboth. And Jezebel's, she was a scoundreless to the high degree. If you have questions or comments, speak up. Matthew 26.
There hasn't much changed.
No. Principles are all there because we're dealing with the same kind of people. Sin did not cease when Noah got off the ark in Genesis 9. It wasn't long until Noah himself sinned. So sin has been there. So we deal with it all the time. Verse 59 of Matthew 26. Now the chief priests, the elders, and all the council saw false testimony, notice that, against Jesus to put him to death. Now here's national Israel violating their own law to get rid of Jesus. Their law said, at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall every word be established. Don't bear false witness. So they're asking Jews, and in this case, remember, whatever the person's seeking against the other person, if they're false witnesses, is to happen to them. They're seeking false witnesses, and if the law was observed, they'd be crucified, not Jesus. They sought them, but they found none. Even though many false witnesses came forward, they found none. But at last 2 false witnesses came forward and said, this fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days. That's not what he said. And the high priest arose and said to him, do you answer nothing? What is it these men testify against you? But Jesus kept silent. And the high priest answered and said to him, you may have, I adjure you, King James, I put you under oath, by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. The testimony didn't say, he said, I'm the Christ, Son of God. It said, he said, I can tear down the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. Jesus said to him, it is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Now, how can a man sit in heaven and come on the clouds of heaven at the same time? He did it by allowing the Roman army to destroy Jerusalem. When someone causes or allows or permits something to be done, sometimes it can be said as though they did it. Then the high priest tore his clothes, saying, he has spoken blasphemy. What further need do we have of witnesses? Look, now you have heard his blasphemy. What do you think? Well, that settles it there. Why wasn't it asked, what evidence is here, what law is violated? They answered and said, he's deserving of death. Then they spat in his face and beat him, and others struck him with the palms of their hands, or some translations say with rods, saying, prophesy to us, Christ, who is the one who struck you? All of this treatment of Jesus based on false testimony that they put together. Acts 6. Get in verse 8. Ananias and Sapphira. He's talking to Sapphira. Peter answered her, tell me whether you sold the land for so much. She said, yes, for so much. Then Peter said to her, how is it that you have agreed together, two witnesses, to test the Spirit of the Lord? That's chapter 5, it should be. That's where I'm reading right now. I'll get to 6 in a minute. Then Peter said to her, how is it that you have agreed together to test the Spirit of the Lord? Look, the feet of those who buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out. Agreed together. So you're a people giving false witness, lies about what they've done. This is not in the court. This is with Peter and the apostles. Now go to chapter 6. Stephen, full of faith and power, did great wonders and signs among the people. Then there arose some from what is called the synagogue of the freedmen, Cyrenians, Alexandrians, and those from Cilicia and Asia, disputing with Stephen. And they were not able to resist the wisdom and the spirit by which he spoke. Remember, Jesus had promised the apostles that when you're brought before the councils, you'll be given what you need. Well, here, Stephen has it by inspiration. Then they secretly, now you can mark this down, when folks are having to work secretly, something's wrong with what they're doing. Induced men to say, we've heard him speak blasphemous words against Moses and God. And they stirred up the people, the elders and the scribes, and they came upon him, seized him, and brought him to the council. They also set up false witnesses who said, this man does not cease to speak blasphemous words against this holy place. What's that? Temple and the law. For we have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth will destroy this place and change the customs which Moses delivered to us. And all who sat in the council, looking steadfastly at him, saw his face as the face of an angel. Then, I tell you anything? Ignore the chapter, remember. Then the high priest said, are these things so? And he said, brethren and fathers, listen. And he gives a great summary of the Old Testament. When they asked him, are these things so, were they interested in learning the truth on this matter? They had already made up their minds. But notice they used one of the accusations against him that they used against Jesus. He said he'll tear this temple down and build it in 3 days. That's not what he said. But that's what was used against him. Then in Acts 7:57, you see 7 just keeps on with Stephen's sermon. Then they cried out with a loud voice, stopped their ears, and ran at him with one account. And they cast him out of the city and stoned him. And the witnesses laid down their clothes at the feet of a young man named Saul. And they stoned Stephen as he was calling on God and saying, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. Why did the witnesses lay their coats down at Saul's feet?
I don't know.
But you can know. Under the law, when witnesses brought an accusation against a person, and he was found guilty, who threw the first stone? The witnesses. What did Jesus say to those who brought the woman caught in adultery? I'm sorry?
That he who is innocent cast the first
All right, whoever among you here is without sin, and the implication in this matter, throw the first stone. Well, where's the man? See, they violated the law by bringing the woman, but not the man. So whichever one among you hadn't violated your own law in this matter, then you go ahead as a witness and cast the first stone. You study the law of Moses, and you see how they violated it in Jesus' 7 mock trials, and how here they're violating it with Stephen.
So there, where the witnesses laid their clothes down, it wasn't actually a reason why it was Saul. He was just standing there,
Yeah, he was just there.
part of it, I guess.
Now, yes, but you don't know that from what you just read. Where would you learn he's part of it?
Well, he tells on himself, don't he?
Before that? Don't make it harder than it is. 8:1. Now Saul was consenting to his death. So what does that tell you?
He was for it.
It tells you that. What else it tell you?
Agreeing with it.
He was, but what else it tell you? Ignore the chapter division. See, it just keeps on. Are y'all getting that picture?
Yeah, there's a lot of them like that.
Yes.
I mean.
Yeah, there are. Because man divided it into books and chapters. It helps us find things. But often, it breaks right in the middle of a continued narrative. Now, if you were going to start 8, you might start it at that time. But not. Now Saul was consenting to his death, because that ties in. They laid down their feet, laid down their garments at Saul's feet. Questions or comments? You see it? 2 or 3 witnesses. One writer said, slander is an example of false testimony about another. Slander is not confined to the courtroom. It is not as easily defined and legislated against. It shuns the open atmosphere and is whispered in corridors and quiet places and allowed to flow freely with the current of irresponsible gossip. Slander convicts, sentences, and punishes its victims in the fickle court of public opinion. If that's not social media, tell me what it is. And when this fellow wrote, social media didn't exist. Slander usually never appears as a definite statement or direct charge. It is disseminated and seeps into people's consciousness as subtle implications and innocent sounding innuendos. A friend of mine posted a statement by another friend of mine that he wrote in an article. This fellow wrote, I agree with most of what you said, but I don't agree with this statement. And my friend wrote back, that's not what he said. Go back and read what he said. See, you read into things sometimes what you think it's saying without reading what it said. What does something say? That's why if you get in a hurry reading things, you're liable to miss the whole point. Or in your own mind draw a conclusion that's not there because you read it into it. Now, when you read something into a text, what's that called? Eisegesis. Good.
It's called what?
Eisegesis. The Greek word eis, into. When you read out of the text what is put there by the author, what's that called? Yeah, all right. Now, David, this goes way back to our hermeneutics class. When some of these folks were mere children. As I remember when we started this class, I started it on purpose for our people here to learn how to study the Bible. We had a discussion about that in one of our classes. And how to study the Bible is called hermeneutics. How to interpret what you read. So every now and then I ask a hermeneutical question to see who may remember what we went over. And I've noticed that some of my former students are quite quiet. And I understand why. First time through is hard to get. That's a lot of material we cover. Questions or comments?
A lot of times the slander does the damage that you're already guilty by it.
And doesn't matter what the evidence is, they've already prejudiced people's minds. I'll give you a personal example. I resigned at a place one Sunday morning. And after I resigned, a man took the two elders down the hall. I saw them going and convinced them that I had, in his words and theirs later, burned the elders with what I said. Those two elders tried to hire a really good friend of mine to take my place. And they went down and talked with him, took him out to eat, rode back to his church building, sat in one of the elders' trucks and talked to him. And they said, James burned the elders when he resigned. They gave him a cassette tape of what I'd said. I burned the elders. He listened to it. We were happening during the week to have a class together. So after class, outside the parking lot, he said, that was wrong for you to burn the elders. He gave the name. I said, what are you talking about? He said, here's what you said. I said, I didn't say that. That's not terminology that I would have used. I didn't say that. Yes, you did. You said that. I said, I didn't say that. He said, yes, you did. I heard it on the tape. I said, first of all, I didn't say it because that's terminology I wouldn't have used. But had I said it, I'd have been wrong and I need to go repent. Correct. So I let it go at that. I went home. I got my copy of the tape. I listened to it word for word. The next morning, when he arrived at his study, I was sitting outside with my copy of the tape, and I said, now we're going in. And we're going to put your tape in, and we're going to listen to it, and then we're going to put mine in and listen to it, because if I set that on your tape, somebody got it. So we went in, got his cassette player, he put the tape in, we were sitting there, I was sitting in his office. We were listening. We listened all the way through. He looked up and said, you didn't say it, did you? I said, no, I didn't say it. I told you I didn't say it. He said, do you mind if I call one of them? I said, no, but I won't call them. So he did. He said, James is sitting here, and we just listened to that tape you gave me, and you said, he said this, but he didn't say it. And that elder said, we didn't tell you he said that. Now you may know why I resigned. At least part of it. And he said, yes, you did. And he told them where they were sitting when they said that. We didn't say that. So when he hung up, I said, now that might tell you a lot about whether or not you want to go work. But see, they presented it in a way that when he heard the tape, he heard me say something I didn't say because it had already been put in his mind. So you can suggest things to people and get it in their minds. It's hard to get it out sometimes, even with evidence. So this is that with which we're dealing. See, I've been there. I know what this is about. And you may have been there also. I can just give you an example that happened to me. But you may have had people plant things in somebody's mind about you. They're not correct.
Same way with preconceived ideas about what the Bible teaches as well.
Absolutely. Most denominational people who believe that baptism doesn't have anything to do with salvation have been preconditioned in Acts 2:38 when they see the word "for" to define it in their minds because of. And there's no lexicon anywhere that would ever define that Greek word because of. It's in order to. Ace. That word right there. Ace. But they hear it because of the remission of sins. They've been conditioned all their lives to hear it that way, to think it that way when they see that word. So that's absolutely. And that is a lot of times what we deal with when we teach people. It's not getting them to understand the truth, it's getting rid of preconceived ideas that have been wrong. And once they see it, they say, well, that's what it says. It's been there all along, but see, you were conditioned to see it differently. That makes sense. So these false witnesses that are taking place. Now we'll drive a peg down here, and we'll take up here in a moment, and once we pause the equipment, I'll make some announcements. As we continue now our study, a little left on your outline, the instigator of false testimony is the devil. Greek word diabolos is your root word there. An accuser, a slanderer. Turn to John 8. You remember I've said to you a lot of times, John 6, 7, and 8, Jesus is dealing particularly with national Israel. In John 8, verse 31, Jesus said to those Jews who believed him, "If you abide in my word, you are my disciples indeed, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." Then you get back to that underlying Judaistic misconception. They answered him, "We are Abraham's descendants and have never been in bondage to anyone. How can you say you will be made free?" When they said that, they were in bondage to Rome. Jesus answered them, "Most assuredly I say to you, whoever commits a sin is a slave of sin. And a slave does not abide in the house forever, but a son abides forever." Conclusion. Therefore, if the Son makes you free, see, he's claiming sonship, you shall be free indeed. I know that you're Abraham's descendants, but you seek to kill me. Now these are the ones who believe him. Because my word has no place in you. I speak what I have seen with my Father, and you do what you have seen with your father. They answered and said to him, "Abraham is our father." Jesus said to them, "If you were Abraham's children," Abraham's seed, some may have, "you would do the works of Abraham." All right? If you were Abraham's spiritual descendants, he's not talking about physical, they are, then you would do the works of Abraham. Romans 4 is referred to as the faith of Abraham. But now you seek to kill me, a man who has told you the truth, which I heard from God. Abraham did not do this. You do the deeds of your father. They said to him, "We were not born of fornication. We have one Father, God." Jesus said to them, "If God were your Father, you would love me. For I proceeded forth and came from God, nor have I come of myself, but he sent me. Why do you not understand my speech? Because you are not able to listen to my word, because of your blinded mindset. You are out of, your father you belong to, your father, the devil. And the desires of your father you want to do." And that particularly included getting rid of Jesus. "He was a murderer from the beginning." right? That dealt with Abel, Cain and Abel. And does not stand in the truth, because there's no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own. He speaks of his own. For he is a liar and the father of it. So every lie that's ever been told or ever will be told comes out of the devil. I won't read it, but in Job 1, verses 6 to 11, and 2, verses 1 to 6, Satan falsely accused Job to God. The only reason he serves you is you've given him all this, and you've built a fence around him. You won't let everything touch him. You touch him, he'll curse you to your face. That was a false accusation, and the book of Job is a refutation of those two false accusations.
So you're saying there in 44 that where it says you were a murder from the beginning, that was going back to Cain and Abel?
All the way back
and
to
not to where that Adam and Eve, where that the devil, lied to Eve and she ate of the fruit.
That's where sin started, but murder didn't start there. The first murder you read about in
Yes.
Cain killed Abel.
Yeah.
So he was a liar from the beginning when he told Eve, "You shall not surely die." But he was not a murderer at that point. He became the father of murderers when Cain killed Abel. At that point, he was a liar. He told them a lie about what God said. You shall not surely die. He introduced sin. No doubt, then murder is a sin. So he introduced it. He's the father. He's a murderer from the beginning. Let me show you that. Turn to 1 John 3. First John 3, beginning verse 10. In this, the children of God and the children of the devil are manifest. Whoever does not practice righteousness does not do right. He is not of God, out of God. Nor is he who does not love his brother. For this is the message that you heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. Not as Cain, who was of the wicked one, and did what? Slew his brother, murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his works were evil and his brother's righteous. All right? He was of the wicked one. He belonged to the devil. The devil was a murderer through Cain from the beginning. That makes sense. So that's why I don't start with Adam and Eve. He introduced sin to Adam and Eve, but he introduced murder through Cain. Anyone else? Questions or comments on that? Did I make that clear? Then if you turn to Revelation 12, beginning in verse 7. And war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon and his angels fought, but they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was cast out. Now who is that great dragon? That serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Then I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brethren, who accused them before our God day and night, has been cast down. And they overcame him. Now we have the word by, correct? That would be better read, because of the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And they did not love their lives to the death. They were willing to die for what they believed. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, because he knows he has a short time. you have the devil, that old serpent, Diabolos, accuser, slanderer, who accused our brethren before God day and night. So when people lie, they're working out of the mindset of the devil. Now, I'm talking about people who lie on purpose. It's their lifestyle. Sometimes we all, because of weakness or immaturity, may find ourselves lying. If we do, we become aware of it. What do? We repent of it, and if we need to correct it with somebody else, we go correct it. That's different from this willful lifestyle of just saying, I'll just say whatever I want to say. I'll lie if it'll get me out of it or help me or profit me. That's my lifestyle. That's the way I do it. Questions or comments? All right, let's stress then the importance of telling the truth. Little g, don't you think in our world it's important enough to read these passages? Psalms 39, verse 1. I said, I will guard my ways, lest I sin with my tongue. I will restrain my mouth with a muzzle, while the wicked are before me. There needs to be self-control with our tongue, doesn't there? Sometimes we run off at the mouth when we've been better to just be quiet. Keep our mouths out. Proverbs 6. You have the things that Jehovah hates. He hates liars, false witnesses. The antithesis to that would mean he loves those who tell the truth, who do just the opposite of these things in verses 16 through 19. Look at Proverbs 14, verse 5. We read this, antithetical parallelism. A faithful witness does not lie. Verse 25 of that chapter. A true witness delivers souls. You may have saves lives. But a deceitful witness speaks lies. Chapter 19, verse 5, we read, and verse 9. Then chapter 25, we read verse 18. Let's go to Matthew 5, in the Sermon on the Mount. Verse 33. Yes, I have a semicolon, doesn't belong there. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform your oaths to the Lord. Now this is dealing particularly with oaths. Don't take an oath and not fulfill it, which would take you back, particularly to Leviticus, Deuteronomy. But I say to you, do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Nor shall you swear by your head, because you cannot make one hair white or black, but let your yea be yea, your yes be yes, and your nay be nay, your no be no, for whatever is more than these is from the evil one. You should not have to take an oath for people to believe you. When somebody says to me, I swear this is the truth, I doubt every word they just said. If If you're known for telling the truth, you don't have to swear an oath that you're telling the truth to anybody who knows. That's what that passage is saying. You say yes, let people know that means yes. You say no, let people know that means no. And you're not going to flip-flop on about it. So that's why he says don't swear at all. Don't have to swear in order to establish what you're saying. Then Matthew 19, verse 18. This is where Jesus quoted to the rich young ruler the examples of the 10 words. Now look at Revelation 21. Verse 8. But, so that tells you that's in contrast to what's gone before, so you need to read the context. The cowardly, you have fearful if you're reading King James American Standard. Unbelieving, abominable, murderers, that should be fornicators, those of you with New King James, ESV, sorcerers, idolaters, and A-L-L, biggest little word in the Bible. All liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Now that did not say all liars except little white liars. You hear people all along say, well, I just told a little white lie. No, you told a big black one. You just repainted it so you can get by with it in your own mind. All liars. Now that means folks who tell a lie so they can surprise somebody. Had a woman tell me one time that she told a little white lie so her mother-in-law and father-in-law would go off somewhere else and then come back to where they were having the party for them. That was going to be a surprise for them. Like, that was okay to do that. It wasn't okay to do that. So we need to think about what we're saying and be people who tell the truth. Same thing in Revelation 22:15. Outside are dogs and sorcerers and fornicators and murderers and idolaters and whoever loves and practices a lie. See, willfulness there. You love a lie, that's your willful lifestyle and practice. One writer said, truth is at all times sacred because it is one of the essential attributes of God, so that whatever militates against or is hostile to truth is in opposition to the very nature of God. So we would all do well to pray every day, Lord, help me tell the truth. Especially when we are in very trying circumstances where lying would help us. Help me tell the truth. Questions or comments on do not bear false witness? Anyone? All right, then we come to verse 17. No coveting. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, nor anything that is your neighbor's. You have a parallel to the new generation, Deuteronomy 5:21. Right, we look at the personal application. You shall not covet. Kalmad is the word, initially meant to desire, delight in, but also means to covet, to lust after. The The 10th commandment prescribes, you shall not covet, which refers to an inordinate, ungoverned, selfish desire. Israel was not to desire, covet, the gold adorning idols, to lust after prostitutes, or to covet fields. Achan's sin at Jericho was that he desired the spoil, kamah, Joshua 7:21. Remember, Achan lied about it and hid it, and then was found out, and he and his family were burned. But check me out on this. 21 men died, I believe that's right, at Ai because of what Achan had done. And by the way, I was told that in earlier time when I was talking about Ahab and Jezebel and Naboth, that I got my tongue tumbled and had Naboth married to Jezebel. Naboth did not marry Jezebel. He had better sense than that. Ahab married Jezebel. So that now stands corrected. All right, go to Deuteronomy 5:21. And again, you shall not covet. And you have these things listed. Moses also used the word desire, which is from all, to wish for. You're not to wish for things that would bring you into a position of coveting something that belongs to somebody else. In Genesis 3:6, we read that Eve saw the fruit, that it was good, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and that it was desired. And you see the word there, ta'aval. If you look up ahead of you there, you see the word alval. Ta'aval is from that root, alval. A longing, by implication a delight, subjectively satisfaction, objectively a charm. What Eve did was covet that forbidden fruit. The word used is the root word from whence we get this word covet in Exodus 20. Turn to Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 9. Those of you who didn't cheat and get thumb index will probably say Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. Very good. We'll put a star on your chart. Nahum, Habakkuk. Habakkuk 2, verse 9. Woe to him who covets evil gain for his house, that he may set his nest on high, that he may be delivered from the power of disaster, from the hand of evil. Put my house up above, let everybody else get all the evil. I'm coveting that position for myself. And that's the word balsam, which means a greedy getter. In Romans 7 and verse 7, what shall we say then? Is the law sin? Certainly not. On the contrary, I would not have known sin except through the law. For I would not have known covetousness unless the law had said, you shall not covet, epithumia, a longing for what is forbidden. Sometimes translated lust. One writer said, little e, covetousness is not limited to a single area. It can and does go in many directions, depending on the direction one's lust may take. So depending on that for which you are lusting. You and I may not lust after the same thing. We look at the particular application. He says a neighbor's house and animals. So this forbids inordinate affection and desire for property. Now that's what Ahab had with Naboth's vineyard, 1 Kings 21. He was coveting that vineyard, so much so he allowed Jezebel to have Naboth murdered. You're not to covet your neighbor's wife. This forbids inordinate desire or conjugal pleasure or satisfaction. Now, that's what David did with Bathsheba. And if you look at Matthew 5, again in the Sermon on the Mount, verse 28, I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So you're coveting, having sexual intercourse with this person. Matthew 14, verse 3. For Herod had laid hold of John and bound him and put him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because John had said to him, and that's a continuous tense verb there, John kept on saying to him, it is not lawful for you to have her. So Herod was violating this commandment also when he was living in adultery with Philip's wife. And then in Ephesians 5, verse 3, but fornication and all uncleanness or covetousness, let it not even be named among you, as is fitting for saints. So saints should not be a covetous person. It's interesting to me that in the New Testament, in the qualifications of elders and deacons, the idea is let each man have his own wife, not someone else's. Third, do not covet a neighbor's servants. This prohibits inordinate desire or a high estate. I want to have all these servants serving me. My neighbor has servants. I'm lusting after that. A neighbor's anything. This includes everything, not specifically named. Remember in Galatians 5:19-21 that when the works of the flesh are listed, the last one is, and such like. All these things and their kinfolks, everything like that. So, if you don't covet your neighbor's house and animals, his wife, his servants, or his anything, that pretty well solves it. I can take you to a place in our state where out in the middle of a pasture, there's a humongous, South Georgia, that's big, house that a fellow built. There's another man in that county that was going to build a house, and he said to the architect, you know that house? He said, yes, I want mine bigger. So I want the biggest house in the county. Well, when you got money enough to hire folks to keep it clean for you, I guess that's all right. I have to have the best. I have to have the biggest. The preventive application. How are we going to prevent it? Number one, realize the channel of covetousness. Covetousness comes from the heart. Now remember up here. That's the heart. Psalms 119. Some of you have thumbprints there because we spent several years in Psalm 119, I think. Verse 36. Incline, cause to lean, my heart to your testimonies and not to covetousness. So the Word of God will help us fight covetousness. Realize it's from the heart, so control your thinking. As you study the Bible, it's amazing how many sins go back to our thinking Get your thinking right. You saw all these others. Think right about things. One writer said, here the Mosaic Law takes a step enormously in advance of any other ancient code. Most codes stopped short at the deed. A few went on to words, not one attempted to control thoughts. Thou shalt not covet lays it down again, that we are not your slaves of our natural desires and passions, but have a controlling power implanted within us, by means of which we can keep down passion, check desire, resist impulse. Have any of you heard the phrase, impulse buying? What does that mean? I knew a lady one time that if she got depressed or was having difficulty, went to buy something. And that was all right, as long as her husband made good money. But when he lost his job, she didn't lose the impulse. And we can all be there. One woman said, one of the most important things I enjoy is going to the mall and walking down, looking in the windows and reminding myself of all that I can do without. Now that's self-control. And now, well, this has been going on many years, we have the shopping channel. So I can sit at home in the luxury of my house and spend more money than I have. Huh? Well, I'm sorry. I hope you get over it. Yes, and some people do sometimes, don't they? Yes. Another writer said, covetous people will break all of God's commandments in order to satisfy their desires, because at the heart of sin is sin in the heart. Look at Matthew 15. Verse 19. For out of the heart proceed evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witness, blasphemies. Out of the heart, out of your thinking. So we must get our thinking right. Another writer said, this attitude of covetousness pervades most other forbidden activities. It starts with wanting it. And then we do whatever necessary to acquire it. So that was the attitude behind a person who's covetous will break any commandment to get what he wants. Another said, there are two ideals by which men mold their lives. One makes God the center of all things. The other makes self the center. One says, thy will be done. The other says, my will be done. Now notice this. It is in the heart that accepts this latter ideal. Remember that the channel by which covetousness comes is the heart. So Solomon said something like, keep your heart with all diligence. The second way to deal with covetousness is remember the consequences of covetousness. You realize that covetousness has a psychologically degrading effect upon an individual. It will break you down. Now, we won't have time to complete this, but we will try to begin it. Number one, it destroys previous success. In Joshua 7, Israel was having success against Jericho, and then they left Jericho and went up to Ai. I think I said 21, it may be 36 men died at Ai. When in doubt, do what? Look it up. Verse 5, Joshua 7. 36 men died because of what Achan did because of covetousness. Now Luke 12, 13 to 21, the rich farmer. He had had tremendous success. His barns were just running over. And instead of being happy with that and using it well, he said, I'm just going to build bigger barns and I'm going to sit back and say, eat, drink, and be merry, basically, or tomorrow you die. And God said, not tomorrow, this night. And then he asked this question, then whose will all these things be? And as I get older, ask, when we're gone, whose will all these things be?
And the trustees, as soon as they'll be in the faith, they'll be vengeance.
Yeah. And those of you who tried to clean out, realize you accumulate a whole lot more than you think you've accumulated. And you get our age and you get to thinking, I don't want my children to have to deal with this, so you start trying to get rid of it, and it seems like you can't get rid of it. You say to your children, now we want you to take this home. We don't want it.
No, I don't want anything.
We don't want it. So then you try to give it to other people. They don't want it either. So if you've been successful and you become covetous, it will destroy that success that you've attained. It will take it foot up the way. And Achan is an example, Israel's an example, and the rich farmer. Questions or comments on what we've done tonight?